Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are tuning in from, or if you are catching us on replay. This is The Awesome Journey, and I am your host, Kelle Steinecke, along with my co-host in care, Christy Howard. And we're just two girls that connected on LinkedIn 15 years ago, live on opposite sides of the country, have giving hearts, a passion for paying it forward, and I may have prayed to be living louder in my purpose, and now here we sit in front of microphones bringing you The Awesome Journey. And as many of you know, and for those of you that are new here, one of our primary goals was to highlight incredible individuals to share their unique stories and challenges, because we all need a reminder that we are united in our personal journeys. And today's guest, and again, I say it every week, but it's true, we nailed it. And we're super stoked to have Dave Snell with us, who I do want to give a shout out to Dawn Cohen of the Hour of Empower. That is where Dave and I originally met. And of course, hearing part of his story, it was a no-brainer for Christy and I to be like, we need to talk with this guy and have him here. Dave is a retired from the Navy. He worked in the intelligence community along with special ops. He is a keynote speaker, the CEO of Snell Advisory Group, and he is also a fitness or a mental fitness advocate. Oh, that was hard for me to say, which clearly is a no-brainer why we would have had him on here. And he's going to talk to us today about his mental health journey, along with his program that he has put together to help others, and the 4 M's that we will discuss over the course of this episode. So that being said, Dave, welcome. We're so honored, privileged to have you with us today. Thank you so much for your service. And before we do turn it over to Dave, I will turn it over to my co-host in here, Christy Howard.
Hello, hello, hello. I think I got technical stuff finished. I'm usually playing in the background. I think after all these months, how many months have we been doing this? I think I'm getting it. No, we all love our vets. We all love, having people talk transparently of their struggles. And, Kelle filled it all. But Dave has an interesting story, but so does all our guests and all our guests coming. We all have an interesting story. That's why we call it The Awesome Journey. So Dave, tell us, who are you? Why are we here?
Well, first, thank you again, Kelle, and go back like you did to Dawn for introducing us. I think it was a great connection here, and Christy having me on. Long story short, very quick, is again, like you said, a retired naval officer with 20 years plus in the intelligence community / working with special operations deployments overseas on ships for a few years. But what has happened since I left the Navy, gosh, almost 8.5 years ago now, is I started to really tackle the problems that I knew I had, but I pushed, to the side, saying, I'll just deal with them later. I'll deal with them later. And those were depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress. And I never put together really the big picture of all the traumas that had accumulated, the little T traumas, I call them, the little micro things that happen in our lives that amass over time, combined with, big T traumas, those major events in our lives that go, wow, that just shocked my system, and I'm reacting to, because it had effects on my relationships with my family, with my coworkers, with my friends. And just as the pandemic was kicking off, I realized it was time to start making changes. I needed to understand what was going on. And I was very fortunate to have 2 people not come into my life, but to really help me focus. And that was an old skipper who is a mental health coach. Or a health coach. Sorry, I'm mixing the 2 people here. Sorry.
I had a hard time saying it too. So
he's a health coach who got me to start losing weight, who got me moving again. With the loss of weight, the increased energy. Said, okay, I'm going to start doing some more things active.
Wasn't that your trigger point? What made you finally address it was when you got up that one day.
Yeah, and God bless me for myself here. I'll pat myself. I know dates like it's nobody's business. December 29th of 2019, I got on the scale and I saw a number above 200 pounds. And I had always told myself, no way am I ever going over 200 pounds. And I just, nope, it's changing. Right now, I'm shifting gears. And a couple days later, I called that old boss and I said, hey, sir, I need some help. Can you help me lose some weight? And he got me on track, got me started. And again, I remember I put things together here. It was Martin Luther King Day of 2020. I started his weight regimen. And 2 days later, the second piece fell into place, and I had a therapist I'd been working with for about 7 months, and she finally looked at me in end of November 2019 and said, I'm sorry, Dave, but this isn't going to work. You keep lying to me.
Ooh.
You're not telling me the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, and we cannot break through these barriers that are holding you back until you come open with me.
God bless you.
Had you been?
I'm sorry?
Had you been?
Probably not intentionally, but
Yeah.
When we talk about mental health, and I liken it to what we do in the Navy, especially the intelligence community, where we have compartments, and I worked in the top secret SCI world, which also had compartmented information, which had another, we just had compartments within compartments. And we figured out that that's what was happening in my brain.
Mm-hmm.
An event would happen, I'd block it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would put a wall around that block and another one. And we just could never get deep enough to really get to all of it. So yeah, I was probably not telling her everything. There is a trauma in my childhood, actually, that I didn't come clean on or even scratch the surface on until I was in my 30s. And this therapist was like, Dave, you got to tell me the whole story. And I said, I cannot get beyond that next wall. And it wasn't that I was intending to lie to her.
Right.
I couldn't do it.
We protect ourselves.
Yeah.
Yes,
We protect ourselves with stories. And
so 2 days after I started that weight loss program, she started me on a new program, which was neurostimulation, which tries to change the frequencies and the different, change the intensity of the frequencies in which our brain operates, I think.
And that also called EMRD. Am I mistaken?
Oh, EMDR.
EMDR.
Is eye movement disassociation and reconnection, I think. I always mix it up.
Yeah.
And we had tried that, and I just couldn't get through the blocks. This one is neurostimulation. The brain operates on alpha, beta, gamma, and delta waves. In different parts of the brain, here's your normal. If you're anxious, it's going to go too high, too fast. If you're depressed, it's going to go very slow. And different parts of my brain were all over the place. So neurostimulation tries to bring all the parts of the brain as close to the middle as possible. And that, from the first day, I was like, I feel different.
Oh, wow.
I feel very different. And it takes time to be accumulative to have a longer term effect. And we did that probably for about a year. And in addition to that, when we talk about traumas, we're talking about a shock to the nervous system and the vagus nerve, which is the largest nerve in our body, touches all of our major organs, and it's in charge of your fight, flight, or freeze response to anything going on around you. The stomach butterflies you get before a speech or an event. So she also got me on a treatment that kind of calmed that down over time, so that I hate this word. I don't like this word. The trigger events. Yeah. I think it's been overused is my problem. And what happens is we have these events, and it forces us to respond in a jerk or a jolt without thinking, nasty, depending on the event. This kind of calms you down so you can, okay, I'm not going to respond as quickly, as negatively to a trauma event, a spouse or a car coming too close to you and you freeze up. You can calm down into it. So those two people they don't know each other. They just happen to be in my life. And simultaneously, we went through 2020 and I got better. I finally addressed a lot of problems that I was having. And
what was for the weight loss motivation was obviously the scale, that it was like, this is where I said I would never be, I'm going to do it. What was the, what drove you to finally reach out to a counselor to seek outside help?
I had been seeing a counselor. Okay, well, I've seen several throughout my lifetime, throughout my adulthood. I saw one shortly after I retired. I don't want to call it a nervous breakdown, but I had stress at work. I had stress at home. I wasn't eating right. And then we can talk about the gut-brain connection in a bit too. And my body just went, I can't take it anymore. And I'll be quite honest with you. I was a project manager at a hospital in their IT department. And I went to my car and I'm bawling. I'm shaking. I'm crying. I'm yelling at the car, just screaming. And I looked across the parking lot and I said, I need to go see a doc. I need to talk to a doctor. And then it hit me. I said, I can either go in there to the civilian hospital and spend the next 45 minutes explaining away my life history with depression and anxiety, or I can drive 40 minutes over to the Naval Hospital, which I ended up doing. And within minutes of walking in, giving them my ID, they said, okay, Mr. Snell, we got you. We're going to get you the help. And I went and saw a therapist then. And that lasted a little while. And I said, oh, I'm better. I'm fine. And this is a cycle with depression and post-traumatic stress in general, is we go through a treatment and you think you're fine. Well, I don't need the medicines anymore.
Right.
That's
good enough. That's going to help me.
So my question is, when you went to the Naval Hospital and did you hold back because of things that you couldn't, confidentiality and stuff like that? Because I know people who have been in the military or the ABC agencies they're like, you got to go see a therapist. And they're like, I can't share anything.
Well, at this point in that scenario, I was out of the Navy. It was not a issue with my clearance. But okay. Happy to go back to another example.
I was going to say, you did have an issue though when you were in the military, right? Didn't you go in about the stigma of going to seek help and how that impacted?
Yeah, so that goes back to 2002, my first marriage. I was depressed. I was stressed at work. I was just anxious, not really sure what was going on. And I went to a therapist and they said, okay, we need to put you on some meds. And I went and told her, okay, I got the meds. And the doc said, look, you're a tactical action officer on a ship, which means you have weapons release authority. We're in Japan, so we're in a forward deployed naval force position, we call it. And I said, okay, I got to tell the skipper. I got to tell the captain. And this is where I first really felt the negativity in the military on this subject was, hey, Captain, I got to tell you, I'm taking Prozac because the doctor says I'm depressed and this is the best way to treat me. And his response was just, oh, does this mean you're going to go around all happy and crap on my ship? And it was just kind of this disconnected personal relationship reality for him, that it was just, oh, well, you're just nuts. Go away. I don't want to deal with you.
Well, and unfortunately, I don't think they've ever been trained. I mean, the military.
That's right.
They're not trained.
That's right. I think that's changing. I see that changing through, I live in Virginia Beach. And I used to work over at Norfolk Naval Station for a little while, a couple of years ago. And I see some changes, but even as recently as September of 22, is Mental Health Awareness Month.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a retired captain who was a GS, I think Steve was a GS-15. And he went around the entire office floor. He's like, hey, I just want to make sure you guys are all mentally healthy.
Right.
And
Poking fun at it, right?
Yeah, a little bit. And I looked at him and I said, Steve, I'm fine because I go see a doc twice a week for mental neurostimulation and talk therapy. And he goes, I had no clue. I'm like, well, of course you did, because you're still making fun of it.
Right.
Now, to your point, I will. He is probably in the old school mentality of not trained on it the way he should have been, like they are now with new skippers.
Right. Suck it up, Buttercup, or rub some dirt on it, right?
Right. Right. So back to the ship, I went through my days and I did my job for another month, and I finally I hit a breaking point with that captain. He was very abusive. He was very negative. I could never do anything right with this guy. I spent 4 days in Combat Information Center, where we do all the war fighting, if you will, the central nervous system of the ship, if you will. And I had to ask him permission to go to the bathroom. I had to ask him permission to go get something to eat, and then tell him when I came back. And I was in there just 4 days, straight 4 days, and I broke.
So do you think he was doing that just to jerk you around?
I think there was some nastiness in his heart to a degree.
For sure.
He had something out for me, and I don't know what it was.
And it's just a matter of, like, he was picking on the weak in his mind. Like, you are not weak for seeking help. It makes you actually a very strong human to know that I need to get assistance with what I'm dealing with. But he saw the weakness and was taking advantage of that. I mean, that's how it sounds to me anyways. And like you said, it's likely of his era in his upbringing and situation. It doesn't make it okay by any means, but that had to just make you feel, like you said, I mean, even worse.
Yeah. So about a month after, again, I was doing my job, and we pulled into Busan, South Korea, and we went and did some meetings. And finally, second day in Busan, I was the command duty officer, and you have to wear a gun belt. And I sat in my stateroom by myself, and I put the gun out. And I'll be honest with you, I don't remember where the gun ended up. I just knew that I had the intention of pulling that trigger. I knew I was going to pull that trigger. Whether I actually pulled the gun to my face or my head or I don't remember. And it's irrelevant at this point, in my opinion, because the intent was there. And I had this thought, and psychologists have told me that it's human nature to worry about the effects on others. And this is going to sound really weird. I'm not a gun guy, but I said, well, what happens if I shoot myself and it goes through the wall and hurts somebody behind me? I can't do that. So I picked up my phone in my stateroom and I called the doc and I said, Doc, meet me on the quarterdeck. And I went to the quarter, and he knew that I was on the meds as the doc on the ship. And I met him on the quarterdeck, and I was leaning against the railing, and I turned to him with tears in my eyes, and I said, take this damn thing off me. I can't do it. Get me off this ship. I'm done. I'm just beside myself. And I got sent home to 𝑦𝒘𝒆𝒏𝒆𝒚, which, again, now that I think about it, they sent me home with somebody, as they should, but they chose a guy who, for lack of better words, the guy was a whore. He was a man whore. He was not there to watch out for me. He was out there to go out and party.
For boondoggles.
And I'm like, bro, I'm not in a condition, and you're not supposed to. What?
Right. That's the last thing you needed, was to go out and party.
Yeah. So I got the treatment I needed.
Thank God.
And I went on limited duty, so I got off the ships for the last time in my career there. And I ended up, after treatment was done, they said, look, you're not going back to sea. You're fit for duty, but not for sea duty. So you got to transfer communities. And I went to cryptology again. And that meant a tour at the National Security Agency. And again, I had a doctor who said, look, you've got to tell the skipper what you've done, what you're on. Your clearances are such that you need to tell somebody. And I said, okay. And I went and told the skipper, and she looked at me and said, oh, well, if you're on that, then I need to do an investigation. I need to know that you're fit for duty. I need to know that, the SSO knows this. And I looked at her, I said, ma'am, time out. I just got read back into the top secret SCI categories just 2 days ago. Oh, I didn't know that. I wasn't informed. And that was one of those things where I just looked and I said, I'm never telling anybody again unless it's absolutely necessary.
Right.
And
why would you? Because anyone you
I'm not laughing at you. I'm just like,
No.
it's a communication.
Yeah.
So I ended up having to tell folks eventually again, because I got read into, again, I mentioned TSSCI is where I was. But when I started going into some other compartments that required, and they said, you need to tell us. Okay, then they asked specifically, I had to tell them. I never volunteered again what meds I was on. Well, I didn't tell them again probably for another 4 years. And then I started seeing a sea change in the mentality against mental health, especially with, now mind you, we're talking, that conversation with my second skipper was 2003. So we'd just gone into Iraq. Like 2 weeks before, 2 weeks after that conversation, we went into Iraq. So 2004, 2005, we start to see guys coming back with post-traumatic stress. We start seeing guys coming back with other traumas in general and damage to their bodies. And I don't mean to dismiss that at all. So I started being a little bit more open. Yeah, I'm seeing a therapist. Yes, I'm on Prozac. Yes, I'm on Wellbutrin, whatever it was. And it took a while, but eventually I started coming around and just saying, I'm not going to stand by and let people belittle people for getting the help they need.
Right.
I became very open and honest about my struggles to help others.
Well, it's still, and John makes a comment on his comment, and it says seeking for help while active duty, especially in special ops, in the special ops world, is almost always a career-ending choice. You're tagged, labeled, and you seem as damaged good. No team will take you, and this is why many in his world, in the warrior culture, suffer in silence and refuse to ask for help. I know a lot of people, Black Ops, the ABCs, the vets, that, when Kelly and I've had these type of people on our show, they break down because they have no help. However, it's usually there's a gun involved saying, I can't do this anymore. And to have somebody like you had on the ship, and we can say he's old school. He's just a grumpy old man. He's stuck on, come on, being on the Navy, stuck on the, on that boat. It's not like it's a yacht. So, there's a lot of mental crap going on in your head. However, somehow, and for what you're doing, it needs to, and I'm not going to go into the politics, but unfortunately, we always go into it somehow. We need to make sure that our veterans, our military, are in a safe space. Amen. And yes, I understand that if you're a Navy SEAL and you are out in during the war and you've got a Black Ops CIA guy going, I want you, I want you, I want you. That CIA guy most likely will go, yeah, I hear you're on Prozac. Not really sure if I really want you. It doesn't matter. They're trained to do what they've got to do. And anyway, I'll get off my soapbox. But
you're absolutely right. There's a, and I appreciate John's comment, because I tell you, in 2004 2004, I deployed with a particular special mission unit to Iraq. And it was a 90-day pump where we were operating 20-hour days for 90 days at a stretch. It was a little bit more than, I think. It was about 3.5, almost 4 months in the end. But and I did my job. I did it well. Yeah, I had some stressful times where the traumas came out. I might have yelled at somebody a little bit too harshly. Okay. And I've talked to those guys. I'm still friends with a lot of them today. And then in 2011, February of 2011, I went back to Fort Bragg to deploy with that same special mission unit to Afghanistan. And I filled out some paperwork that I didn't have to. The first caveat, I went through the National Security Agency the first time. Second time, now I'm in the special operations community. And I filled out this paperwork and said, hey, have you ever had mental health issues? Yes, I had this issue. And I had this next one after I was already with this unit in 2005. Okay. I get asked by the psychologist, hey, what's going on? What happened? Why did you have to go back to the therapist? Okay. And he said, sounds good. Good on you. Then I had 2 Green Berets take me in a room by myself and say, well, Mr. Snell, I'm sorry, sir, you're not going to go. I said, well, why not? Well, you had this mental health incident. I said, okay, I've deployed with you guys before. Yes, but you had this second one after you deployed with us.
Yeah.
So, and
I get your point.
finally, I looked back at him and I said, I'm only going for 90 days. And they said, only 90 days? Oh, you're fine. You can go.
There you go.
Like, why was that a magical thing? So 90 days, it's okay?
Exactly.
If it was 91, then dang.
Yeah. It really told a different story. And it really frustrated me as someone who knew, and I told them flat out, I think almost in the same exact words, if you don't let me go, I will be more mentally disturbed than if you let me go, because I'll be more upset as a guy who wants to get in the fight,
right,
than to be told I'm not good enough.
Right. They were all exacerbating it. And that's the point with it is like not, and like Christy was mentioning, some of the other conversations we've had with other people, because even though today it is available all over the place, but when you're, military, first responder, what have you, that there is still that stigma because you're the hero. You're not supposed to need help. And I remember one specifically saying when he was in his captain position, because he also had suicidal ideation and tried to end his life at one point, and thank God it didn't work, and is now, of course, gotten help and is helping others through a lot of organizations that he works with. But he said when they would come in as a captain, he would tell his crew, hey, they're here if you want to go see them, but I'm not going to be in that shit. And poked fun at it, and now feels such horrible regret of knowing like I was pushing the stigma, because who on your team, if you're the leader, is going to go, well, I'm going to go in now because my captain just said, well, I don't need that shit, but it's here if you guys need it. And it's exactly what this did to you. And just hearing it hurts my heart, because it's like, people, your words make things so much worse by your words and your actions. I mean, just belittling it. And I do say this a lot of times, people minimize what they don't know, and that hence why they poke fun at it. And I think it's a very immature way to approach anything, because it's like old school, go back to, your mom always told you, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all.
Yeah, but you're in the military. That ain't going to happen.
Oh, hell no.
I mean, there is a good sense of suck it up, buttercup. Yes.
Oh, yeah.
But also from what I've seen of my years of being around military and stuff like that, when people make fun of it, especially, you're making them look in their own mirror.
Oh yeah. Heck yeah.
And that's making them uncomfortable, because now they're seeing like, oh, he's showing something, and
I don't want to see it.
He's being transparent, and I'm not ready to be there, or I won't be there because I'm too big of a tough person. Right. So that's where, people tend to.
Totally
And that's
agree.
anything.
Yep, they see yeah, exactly. They see themselves and it scares the hell out of them because they don't wanna see it.
Yeah, and until you're willing to look internally and truly understand what you are about and what you stand for, you will never be okay.
Mm.
You will never find the fit. You'll always be struggling with something until you really, take that internal analysis. And until you do that, you're never going to figure it out. 2020 was a year for me to really dig deep. Once I started to calm down through that vagus nerve reset and the neurostimulation, I could start opening up about a lot more with my therapist. I could talk to her about personal stuff, the traumas that I saw in war, traumas I saw in my childhood, that captain, the way I felt. I never really, I hate to say get in touch with my feelings, but I never really analyzed my feelings to really understand why did I respond the way I did or I do even today. Everybody has their responses to everything. It's a struggle, and the more we can be open and talk about it, the more we have the windows of opportunity. I can tell you that the more I've done these shows and I've podcasts or talks, speeches, it's just another. Another. I hate to say a feather or a pound. It's just some weight has come off.
Oh, so cathartic.
It is cathartic. And I hate the idea that people believe, oh, you were in the military, you must have post-traumatic stress. Oh, you're in the military, you're somehow broken because you went to war. Not everybody who goes to war is broken.
Right.
That's right.
Because some of us have realized, hey, we had a trauma and we're not going to let it break us.
That's right.
Had I not stepped on that scale, had I not had that therapist call me out, yeah, I may have broken. But having the network of friends and people around me, professionals and personal, has been invaluable in telling me where I need to be next.
I love
So,
that.
so share with us your 4Ms and where you've gone.
Where that came in. Yeah.
Yeah. So the 4Ms are movement, mind, meditation, and meaning. And they didn't come as a certain epiphany or in a particular order as I thought through them. It just started through the pandemic. Again, I lost the weight. I started to have more energy and I got back into running. And the more I ran, which is something I used to love as a kid, to just run. I ran cross country. I played soccer.
Bless you.
I started to notice the boost I would get in my day every time I ran and every time I did something active. Not just, and quick side note, every time we flex our muscles, there's something called hope molecules that are released that kind of elate the mind, if you will. So imagine doing that now for a run or weightlifting, putting more strain on just me flexing my arm or something. I started to see the effects and I said, okay, I've got to keep this up. The mind is a little bit of a tricky one because there's two pieces in my mind. There's the professional help you need to have to get through the traumas. And I don't want to limit that strictly to post-traumatic stress. I want to say, look, if you have something that's happened in your life, big T, little t, no T at all, just you're unhappy with something, talk to somebody and have that network to get out. But mind is also the blocks we put in front of ourselves to say, look, I can't, I'm not good enough. Someone else is better than I am. I'm ugly, whatever it is, it's a shift that we have to take to say, look, I can do it. I'm going to do it. I am good enough. And I don't care what anybody's told me in my past. And I bring that one up because because my therapist hit me up every single time almost and said, Dave, damn it, you're good enough. Because apparently that was part of my traumas, was I felt for many years I wasn't good enough.
Yeah.
So there's my, movement, mind. And I've always been fascinated with meditation, and I'd always tried it and then said, well, I failed. I wasn't good at that either. It wasn't good enough. But I came to meditation during the pandemic because I realized, look, at some point, I don't want to see this therapist anymore. Not because she's bad, not because she's been a mean person.
Graduate.
But I need to graduate. I need to do something better, on my own. And I find that, and I've got a couple books behind me on meditation, and one in particular is a vagus nerve meditation to calm the vagus nerve through breathing. And even something as simple as 2 or 3, slow, deep breaths through the nose and out through the nose if possible, calm the vagus nerve. And if you have intention behind it, it focuses you better. And those were the 3 that first came to me. And then part of the treatment, or not the treatment, the health regime that my old skipper got me on, he goes, the process that takes you through is asking, why do you eat the way you do? Why do you do what you do? And, Simon Sinek's Find Your Why. What is your meaning? What is your purpose?
Love that.
So, originally it was like 3 M's and my why. And I was like, well, another word for why is meaning. And that's how I got 4 M's.
Love that.
And it has a daily application. And I don't like to limit this in my talks with people. It's not strictly, oh, we're going to talk mental health and we're going to tie it to the 4 M's. To me, the 4 M's apply to anything you do in your life. As we were talking before we came on, is I used it just 10 days ago in my second marathon. And so let me back up a little bit to 1993. I told myself I'm going to do my first marathon, the Marine Corps marathon in particular. And I got into the training plan. Okay, yeah. And then school, I was still in university at Georgia Tech at the time. And other things got in the way. I just made excuses why I wasn't going to do it.
That's a tough marathon. My sister did that.
Yeah. Then 2003, I said, okay, I'm going to do this in memory of childhood friend who was killed, his Marine aviator, killed in an air show accident in California. I'd known him since I was 5 years old, and he was a year older than me. And then I started deploying from NSA and doing other things. It never happened, and my running regime just went to crap. But in 2013, July 4th, 2013, I looked at my buddy Poker, and I said, Dave, his name's Dave also. I said, Poker, I'm gonna run this marathon before I turn 50, and that's in 9 years, or a little over 9 years. And I kind of fell off. I wasn't even thinking about it until 2020 when I started running again. Long story short, long story longer, I apologize. But I ran it last year, 2022, 5 weeks before I turned 50. That's awesome. I did it again this year. But this year was a struggle. It was right from the get-go. It was 20 degrees warmer at start and finish than last year, which I ran last year. I felt great. I remember looking at my running buddy who's 63 and at the time had a cancer tumor in his neck, and he's running it with me. I said, Joe, I feel effing great at 20 mile mark. And this year at the 2 mile mark, I said, bro, I got to stop. I can't breathe. My legs hurt. I don't know what happened, but just bam, right away, 2.5 miles in, I said, ouch. And as I kept going, I get frustrated. I stopped. I'm not doing the pace I want. And at about the 10 mile mark, maybe 15 mile mark, I looked around at the crowd. And I said, okay, Joe told me back at 4 or 5 mile mark, this isn't about time. This isn't about, making a medal, they give you a medal, but I mean, placing in my age group or first or second in the whole thing. Just go out and enjoy it.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's go back to the M's. Movement's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
I have to run to get there or move to get there.
Right.
Mind, I've got to change it's not good enough, or I can't quit. I've got to get the positive mental perspective. Meditation, my body is now not in a fight, flight, or freeze, but it's stressed, it's strained.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, take a few deep breaths. Run as far as you can. When you're walking, take a few slow, deep breaths. Get back into it. And then finally, what did I do this all for to begin with? What's my meaning? To me, and I have it right here on a card in front of me on my desk I see every day, is why do I do anything I'm doing? Talking, these events, speeches, writing articles, running on my own just for me. It's to set a positive mental and physical example for my friends, family, and coworkers, to know that there's a better path out there than the suicidal option. I don't know if that's the right words to use there, but there is an option out there other than the depression. And there are people who have been there and have found a way out, and I'm ready and willing to help you do so.
So Beth Woods wants to know, what was that name of the vagus nerve meditation book?
So it's actually a chapter or it's one of the meditations that goes in. It's called the Warrior's Meditation, is the book by Richard L. Haidt, or Haidt, H-A-I-G-H-T.
If you send us the link afterwards, and we'll share it in the comments in the post.
Okay. Got it.
It's not strictly about vagus nerve reset meditation, but one of the meditations in there is specifically for vagus nerve.
Right. And I think, like we said, before we came on too, the 4 M's aren't just about, you don't have to suffer from depression, PTSD, or anything else. It's just great for life in general, because life is a marathon. I mean, it goes so well. And one of the other things I try to make a comment on pretty regularly is, and it was interesting because when I went to a therapist many years ago, she said the exact same thing to me as you. She was like, "So when are you going to start telling me the truth?" And it's like, because you're not ready, and your body will only accept the trauma that it's able to accept at the time. So that's why it's a process. But I always like to say, just because you go through it and you've graduated a therapist, if you will, because you do tend to outgrow one. If you're going to the same one for 10 years, you probably need to change. But that you're not finished. Like when you're done going, it's an ongoing practice, which hence, your 4 M's. And I think movement is so important, because one of, the tragedy of losing my father, one of the things that my therapist told me, because I'm like, I'm so angry and so devastated, I didn't know how to process it. And I just felt like this bundle of just rage, but I didn't even know how to express it or how to do anything. And she was like, one, take a pillow and beat your bed, or a tennis racket, something physical, or go on a bike ride. And the day that I did take the tennis racket to my bed, I tore my room apart. But I felt better. But I mean, you feel that, because then you cry. It was a relief. But riding my bike with music and going to the beach and sitting with the ocean, there's something about that movement too that just helps bring peace in some way and healing. So I think it's so important. And I know, for me to this day, when I'm struggling with depression, because I do go through phases, that one of the very first things is like, I need to get back to the gym, or I need to get my ass out and start walking, because it just helps give such clarity. Because that stupid voice in the back of, I think, all of our heads in some way is that I'm not good enough. Mm-hmm. And when it starts getting loud, that to me is my note of, girl, you need to start making some changes, because it's too loud right now. And why? So I think those are so important. And Christy, do you have? I thought
yeah, when you were telling the story about the therapist saying you're not telling the whole story, and you're like, I've got walls around the stories, and we've shared, both Kelly and I've shared our traumatic, few of them, but my last rape, I didn't remember it. Because our body, it shield, our subconscious shields us. And for probably 4 years, I couldn't, I could tell you certain things, but I couldn't tell you everything. And so I went to a spa and climbed up a 40-foot telephone pole. I was going to be belaying. It's windy. You have to get on, and it's like you have to climb up and get on this piece of wood that's about as big as a Frisbee. I'm afraid of heights, at least I was. So I'm doing this. I get up there, and all of a sudden, the whole thing, I'm sitting there bawling because I'm going through it all. However, when I jumped, it released it, because I was freeing myself of what I was holding on to, that I was embarrassed, afraid, wasn't worthy. I deserved what happened to me and everything. So, and now I'm fearless. Jump out of plane, jump off. My girlfriend just belayed off of a 22-foot building for a charity. And I'm like, I want to do that. I just want to jump off and just get down there, because I'm dancing with my skeletons now.
And I think that's a very good
going
point.
through the depressions and everything. We cannot be embarrassed by it, because we were born broken. We will always be broken. And just, embrace that.
So,
okay, we got another book here. We love books.
I'm not a voracious reader anymore, but I listen to a lot when I'm running. And a lot of times I'll buy the book. And I tell you what, Daring Greatly by Brene Brown.
Oh yeah, I've read that. That's
good. Daring Greatly.
And the word that sticks out, and I've listened to her TED Talk, and what I think is missing from a lot of people, and I hear this word a lot, I see it on LinkedIn and in a lot of speeches I've heard, vulnerability. If you're not willing to be vulnerable with others, you're never going to understand what's really going on.
Yeah.
Well, and we were brought up that vulnerability is a weakness. Well, it's not a weakness. It's a powerful thing. And when we are vulnerable and transparent and authentic, and again, we weren't brought up that way, we have nothing to hide. We are who we are.
I think when that guy came around just kind of making the jokes about mental health last year, I said, you know what? I'm going to make you feel uncomfortable. I've dealt with my vulnerability, and I'm going to express it to you, and let's see how you feel. It was a little bit of a, jab in the eye.
Putting back the responsibility onto him and carrying it.
Why don't you take a moment here, Steve, and you understand what you are dealing with. Vulnerability is, like you said, Christy, it's looked upon as a bad thing for so many years of our lives. And I think Brene Brown just nailed it in her speech of why it is so important to understand. And I see Leslie just pointed out it's harder for men, and it's not maybe, it is, it's harder for us.
Well, because you're told, one of the things that stuck out to me, when I lost my father, is people saying you and your brother need to be strong for your mother. And which I get that. But what that said to me, and therapy helped, because strength meant you don't cry.
Yeah. And
you suppress whatever it is that you got. Well, on top of everything else, that was the worst thing to do. But that's how we interpret things. So it's like people's words, and I always feel like people think they're supposed to say profound stuff, and it's like you don't need to. And vulnerability, to let's go back to that. The other reason is because we're afraid of being judged. We don't want to be judged. There's shame in, domestic violence. There's shame in having mental health issues. There's shame and embarrassment, all of those things. And it's unspoken but spoken in some way. And that's one of the reasons why we wanted to do this, is like, let's make this this should be a normal conversation every day. There should be no stigma about it. You have mental health issues. I've had mental health issues. Christy's had mental health issues. Everybody has something. It's just a matter of, we can't undo our stories. They are what they are. And it's about owning them and trusting ourselves to be vulnerable about them. Because I know for me, as an example, domestic violence, I couldn't talk about it for years because of the shame and the humiliation about it, of how it made me feel. And when I first started talking about it, it was as if I was talking about somebody else.
Yeah.
And until you get into a place where you can accept it and forgive myself, which is a huge thing, and be okay with, what? It's just part of my story. It's not my story. It's not the whole story. It's just a chapter.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I think something you said, Kelly, it's got me here for a second, is about 5 years ago, I wrote an essay called "I'm Not MIA, Mental Illness Ashamed." Now, I'm not a big fan of mental illness anymore, because I think that isn't very fair.
Negativity.
Yeah, but and in that article, that essay, I point out we don't have, the stigma used to be, when I saw somebody who was, with breast cancer in particular, women wearing bandanas, okay, there's stigma there. That's been loosened up and we just accept it now.
Mm-hmm.
But there is no difference between mental health and physical health. And I said earlier, I want to tie this together, is the gut-brain connection.
Oh, yeah. The
body and the mind, we want to separate the two, because, the brain, the mind, and the person, it's an ethereal connection between the mind and the brain. But there's a physical component to it. So why separate the two? Mental health is health.
Right.
Physical health is health.
Right.
They're all health.
Right. The only difference is you can see physical fitness or physical health. You can't see mental fitness or mental health.
I can't see cancer all the time, though.
True story.
So that's my point, is if we just say, look, I have a health issue.
Yeah. Right. What does it matter?
It's mental. You don't know if it's physical.
Right.
And that stigma will always be there until we can just say, look, I have a problem.
But even that, like the words, like you said, illness and problem, like those are negative words. Yeah. And it is, I love that you're just saying it's mental health. Like it's just about our fitness, overall fitness. Because all these negative words are associated to it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is, I always say, look, we're never going to get whether the number is 17, 22, 48, 2, we're never going to get to 0 on suicide, veteran suicide, and those numbers I just mentioned, or 0 writ large, because not all suicides are mental health related. They're just situational. Right. I just got to do,
yeah,
it happens. And at the same time, I think we can do everything we can to ensure that everybody knows they have a way, they have someone they can talk to. The resources are there, and yet we still don't see the numbers decreasing as much as we should because of the stigma. And they need to know that it's okay to talk, no matter how much we throw at it.
Yeah.
We need to make sure they're open to the ideas. The last thing, or one other point I'd make, is one of the things I did, it was the 1st of March of 2020, is I grabbed one of these, spiral bound notebooks, and I just started journaling.
Yes.
And I carried it with me. And it may have looked like the funkiest darn thing in the world. I went to Harris Teeter, to Publix, to, the department store. I had that book with me, because if I felt bad or I had some, change in my mood, I'm writing that down. I'm trying to explain, where was I? Why did something change? What happened?
Yes.
And there is a connection between this action with your hand and your brain that releases in a way that typing does not.
Yep.
In a physical journal, I found to be one of the most important tools to use on top of my eating, my therapist, and talking to just anybody. Writing it out is a very helpful tool that you can do on your own. You don't need fancy tools.
That is therapy, truthfully.
Yeah.
And I'm with you. When I write something down, it's so much better than typing it. I remember it better. And there is an action about letting it go. But I love what you just brought up there. And I think it's a great takeaway for everyone. Because I actually have done this with, corporate coaching with clients, is when people are triggered at work. Like when I go into a meeting with such and such, the anxiety I feel and I can't express myself. Write down what you were doing, how it made you feel, what was said, why, so we can recognize what was happening before that led to that behavior. And I think it's such amazing introspective to be able to take that everywhere and be like, oh my God, I'm feeling anxious right now. Why the hell am I anxious? Because I'm standing in line at the grocery store. But I think recognizing those things is huge. And that is therapy. I mean, every therapist I've ever gone to has always told, and I love journaling. That is one of the things that if I stop journaling, that's usually the first thing I start doing. Because I do a 5-minute journal, which I highly recommend, because it starts your day with gratitude and it ends with gratitude, and that will change your mindset for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I had a lot of little T traumas, a few big T traumas. Just life in general gets in its way. But I am super thankful for those two people at the beginning of 2020, independently and simultaneously helping me through what I did. And, one of the things I would point out to people too, is if they do get help, is to be honest with everybody.
Yeah.
Yourself, your therapist, and your family.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that I did was I signed a document with my therapist that said, look, you can talk to my spouse or my family about anything. Anything we talk about in here, you can share with them. And the intent was to have a triangle of support, so to speak, three pieces. If I felt something was off, I knew I could tell the other two. If my family said, I don't feel comfortable telling Dave he's not doing right, they could go to the therapist who could talk to me, and vice versa. The therapist could say, Dave's just not getting what I'm telling him. Maybe if we try a different angle. So having that support triangle was beneficial as well. Don't try to undertake the solution on your own.
That's right. Didn't happen on your own, and it's not going to solve on your own.
Yeah, and the last point I'd point out is, I often say, hey, there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and that old metaphor. Yeah, there's a light at the end of the tunnel, but you know what else there are in train tunnels? There's doors that go to other paths.
Yeah.
Okay, you don't have to be the train.
And also, you need to be kind on yourself, and we're our worst enemies.
Yeah.
We beat the shit out of ourselves because we sit in our head, which the depression goes there. But we need to be kind to ourselves and understand that you're going to, if you start sharing this journey that you're like, I need to share, there are going to be people who are going to judge you. But I always say, those people who are judging you are having to look in their own mirror. So it's not about you, it's about them. They
are not your tribe.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. And maybe down the road, they might come to you and say, I appreciated that you were so vulnerable. I need help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I have 4 guys throughout my career, 2 from my first ship back in 1996, and a couple other Army guys and Air Force guys throughout my 20 years plus, who I know that if anything happens, they will listen, no matter what. And, we say in the military, we're all brothers and we're a family. I mean, if you ask me right now, one of them is an executor of my will. not even my father. It's somebody else. It's just a matter, of course, of having that network of support and knowing that you can be open and vulnerable with somebody is so important to getting beyond whatever that wall is, that door of whatever room you've set up. I finally did come clean on some aspects of what happened in the childhood traumas. It was somebody doing something to a child that they never should have, and it was by a parent, which really is tough. And I don't say it outright here on purpose. It's still a little raw, right. But I joined the Navy as an escape from adulthood. I didn't want to grow up. Yep. So the military is a great opportunity for a lot of different things. And for me, it was a reason to not have to address the traumas from childhood. For better, for worse, whichever it is, it happened. It's the way my life went. But I'm happy in the end that I finally addressed the problems, and I'm here to help anybody who wants to move beyond their own traumas.
I love that. And I that you share that and are so vulnerable with that, because it will help somebody. Somebody will hear. And I think hearing you say that, one of the things is the difficulty is when we say the words out loud, it becomes real.
Yeah, I didn't want to do that for a long time.
That's right. Because who wants to deal with that? I mean, so saying it out loud then it's reality. I mean, so God bless you for sharing that. And I know we're here on the hour, and I know we could, because even just down that path, we could go into so many more avenues for sure. But is there any final thoughts that you have to say for the audience? Where can they connect with you, and how can we help you?
Yeah, I mean, the best way to get me is through my website, 𝒐𝒆𝒏𝒆𝒚, or really even better than that sometimes, it's just LinkedIn, DM me there. I'm on there quite a bit. The best way to help is I'm happy to come and talk to anybody about this, or call me and we can work together. I'm trying to get, my 4M methodology. I don't like that word methodology, but it is a process that works, and I'm looking to share it with anybody I can.
Love that. Christy?
It's a conversation I'm passionate about, mental health and dancing with your skeletons. I mean, I've been saying that. I've been saying that since I was a child. As a teenager, my mother hated that because she was from that generation.
I think Leslie made a comment on it too.
Huh?
I think Leslie loved it too. I saw her comment. Yeah. That's a great quote.
I mean, I'm from a family that don't cry, which now 61, it's very hard when I did cry, but it's like, don't deal with your issues, because that was third generation.
Yeah.
And, now, and I just always danced with my skeletons since, I was in high school. And now having the stigma broken to not be ashamed of who you are, because all of our experiences we go through it to become better people.
Yep.
Yeah. So there's 2 points. I know we're over time. I'm sorry. There's 2 points. I only go to the gravesite in Arlington for my friend who was killed. I don't tell his parents I'm going, because I know they'll want to come with me. And she's a second mother or third mother to me, because every time I've been, that's only 3 times, I'm crying, I'm bawling. And then lastly is my daughter is embarrassed, I think, a good bit, because we'll watch just a TV show. It'll touch a nerve, and I'll just, and I just got to get up and walk away as if everything's cool. But look, there's nothing unmanly.
No.
No, absolutely.
To just shed a tear. I do it more than I want to, but I also know it's healthy at times to do so too.
Amen. I totally agree. I will never forget my father. We watched The Champ when I was a kid, and he was.
Oh, jeez.
but it was good to see that he was emotional. And then again, because it does set the, I don't know if that's why I'm so sensitive, because I am a crier. But I think it was because I was shown that there's nothing to be ashamed of to cry. But in any event, I think it's beautiful that you cry in front of your daughter and show that that's such an important thing.
I still try to hide it though.
Oh, so Dave, again, we could continue to talk, and we'll continue to have conversation, I'm sure, offline for many other things. And we're so grateful to have had you with us today. We can't thank you enough for your service, for your vulnerability and authenticity, because this is going to help so many people. And like Christy said, you know, whatever we can do to help smash the stigma and make this just be a regular conversation where people leave the shame at the door, because there is nothing to be ashamed about of what happens in our life. And everything happens in our life, like Christy said, again, for a reason. We don't always know why, but there is a higher purpose of why it happens. And believe you me, I know I'm going to go to heaven and I have lots of questions for God. But I still trust the journey. And, you know, it's not always good and it's not always pretty. And it's downright shitty sometimes, but the bottom line is it is an awesome journey as long as we're here, and the way that we react to it and evolve with it. So again, thank you so much, Dave. Thank you everyone for being here today and for your comments. We will share the links of Dave's books that he mentioned today, and of course his connection in the comments and as well in the post promo. So until next Tuesday at 1:11 p.m. Eastern time, just remember, we're all on this journey together, and together we do make it awesome. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.